I'm so excited to have Gabs Weber joining us today. She is an amazing counselor, specialist counselor. She's going to tell us a little bit more about how she uses art in the therapeutic process. I'm really excited about this because we've talked about art and art development in our children, but now we're stepping it up a notch to talk about art as part of a therapeutic process. So Gabs, welcome. Thank you for joining us. And can you please tell us a little bit about who you are and where you've come from and what you do?
Okay, thanks very much, Pips. Hi to everybody. Pips, okay, so obviously my name is Gabriella Weber. I have a love of children. I've worked with children most of my life. I have a love of art, and I'm combining them. And I found that art therapy in itself is a very good way to reach children and teens and just help them process what they're feeling. But then art just as itself can be very therapeutic for children, just such a good outlet.
And I think not only for children, I know when I engage in things that are creative for myself, it is also such a therapeutic process just by nature of it being something that is creative and artistic. And tell us a bit more about the world that you work in. And I mentioned that you're a specialist counselor, but maybe you can just tell us a bit more about that.
Okay, well, my dream is to be a qualified art therapist, but that's a very long journey because mainly you qualify overseas or in different provinces. But I've settled on being an art counselor, which means I can use art therapy as a modality. In other words, I can use all the methods of art therapy. I just can't call myself an art therapist. And then basically, I use it when I'm working with children. I use it with adults as well. Because what happens is when you have an art work that anybody, children, adults, are working on, they put their passion, their emotions into the artwork. And very often, if a person's traumatized, they don't want to have this one-on-one confrontation. It's too sensitive for them.
It's almost too much.
It's too much.
It's too deep and sometimes too painful.
Yes, it is. And so having an artwork that you sort of talk them through and help them express those feelings into the artwork, then you can talk about the artwork as the trauma. And they can actually address it directly and say, this represents the person who hurt me, and this is what I'd like to say to them. It's just so empowering.
So it's almost like a bird's eye view,
Excellent word.
a more objective way to look at their trauma, because our emotions get so caught up in our pain, and it's very hard to figure that out in ourselves, even as adults. And I mean, for children, they don't have the words, the language, the cognition. That's all developing. But if they can learn to sort of step away a little bit, they can see that trauma as something objective to be dealt with and that they can work through. Is that sort of what you see in your sessions?
Very definitely. I could not summarize it better. That's exactly it. And then they can separate themselves from it and see it objectively, exactly as you've explained. And then they can choose what they want to do with it. If they want to tear it up, or if they want to see it as a sense of achievement and overcoming, it can be a keepsake that they can say, I dealt with that. But at the same time, it's developing confidence in saying, I can address these things.
Yes.
It's building self-esteem, because the emotional intelligence is now being strengthened. And there's just so much more happening in that process, whether you're doing art therapy or whether you're just working, or I say working with art, but whether you're just doing an art piece for the sake of enjoying the process.
So you're talking about art as part of the counselling process.
Yes, definitely.
And what does that look like, and how does it aid in those counselling? I don't know, we've talked a bit about it already.
I find that it helps process the thinking patterns and the emotions. When a person is traumatized, let's say in the art therapeutic environment, in counseling, a person is traumatized, they are operating from what we call the amygdala, which is here at the back. And that's your fight or flight. Now, with art therapy, I have to take them from that, which is very loaded emotionally, to a executive thinking, to the prefrontal cortex. So through the method, even just of moving, you're activating the motor cortex. So you're activating a whole lot of sensory and thinking. And that way, you're taking all the emotions and you're putting it into the artwork, but the facts are being processed by thinking, let's put it simply, by thinking. And that's the way the brain sorts things out. Once you separate emotion from thinking, it can deal with the thinking and store it safely.
And I mean, when I talk in a therapeutic sense, coming from a background in speech therapy, and in education we have this, we talk about whole body learning and how we want to engage the whole body. I was just thinking about that as you mentioned it now. Engaging our whole body in learning is so key. And I mean, it's awful when we have these big classrooms of kids and we ask them to all at the age of 6 sit down and be still and be quiet.
So difficult.
Because you telling me now that engaging all these different modalities is a way to help us process just our daily life and just to engage in a learning process, never mind a therapeutic healing process from emotional damage or trauma. But I mean, when we're just talking in terms of a classroom setting as well, I think this is where art is so key. Creative arts are so key. And we want our children to be moving and
touching
and feeling and the sensory aspect.
Authority over their own decision making. Like if I want to use the color yellow, it's okay. If I want a yellow mouse, that's okay, because within my safe space, a yellow mouse is all right.
Yeah.
It's not that I believe mice are yellow, but that's what I want to express today. And then that gives a person a sense of autonomy over their decision making.
And then we're raising critical thinkers, and we're raising little thinkers who are going to be able to problem solve their way through life and not sort of sit stuck. And
not wait on someone else to make their decisions. I mean, yes, we need to be guided.
Yes.
But children need to be able to think things through, to reason. And I think using art, especially at school, gives them the opportunity to reason and the freedom to reason. And then they can choose, do I want the yellow mouse or don't I? No, a yellow mouse is ridiculous. But they came to that conclusion themselves. Neural pathways being developed, ability to reason. As opposed to the teacher says you only get a white mouse, therefore it's a white mouse. And without the teacher present, I won't know. If I see a yellow mouse, I'm going to panic because my teacher said you only get white ones.
Yeah. And I mean, also when children are allowed to explore things in their own way and experiment with different mediums and different words and different thought processes and silly sentences or whatever it might be, when it's something that they are interested in, we know that learning is going to be so much deeper, and learning is going to actually have lasting benefits instead of being something that's sort of quick and then forgotten. You know how when we were at school and you would quickly learn the answers for a test, but the next day you just have forgotten it all because there was no deep learning. And so it's also kind of following their lead to a yellow mouse, which is kind of a bit obscure and, we know that that's not something that is real, but yet there's so many important things that they're learning through that process.
They're learning to think out the box. They're learning about possibilities. They're learning that their microbial world has extensions, and it keeps passion going. It keeps imagination alive. And I think with art, especially at school, because they're using their hands, you're learning through the senses, visual, smell, paint smells, getting paint on your hands. How do you feel about it? Colors, mixing colors. And if you mix too many, they become a daub. And maybe you're happy with that. But the benefits are so exponential, and we don't recognize just how valuable they are. This is part of childhood. And when you miss it in childhood, it's okay to pick it up in adulthood. In fact, I insist. Yeah, I insist. Go out there and get messy.
Yeah. And I mean, for myself, I've seen when I engage in what interests me and my passions, I feel so much more of a complete human being.
You do, grounded.
And I feel grounded. And I mean, if that's the effect for us as adults, it's so much, almost exponential, exponentially experienced in the little body of a child,
And a child is, as you say, I mean, most children at least end up in preschool, grade 0, at the age of 4. And it's very confining and conforming. And how many adults do you meet who say, oh, I can't even draw a stick figure? But if they sit through an expressive art session, they will be shocked at what they can do. It's because
Yes.
we've been so used to being conformed that we don't give ourselves a break to experience that whole other side of ourselves, the whole creative side that God gave us. That side is our R&R, our rest and relaxation.
Yeah.
And we tend to neglect it.
You know, and I heard someone say the other day that when we give preschoolers something to color in, and we teach them to start drawing in the lines, their creativity plummets, because before that they have almost genius levels of creativity in them. But when we start to confine them, those measurable, however they measure it, creative processes actually get so limited. And I thought that was so profound. And again, it's those bringing boundaries in instead of letting them create and explore.
Now, I'm all for that. But I call that academic art. And I've said to my son, my grandchildren, and anybody I work with, that is academic art because it's teaching you conformity.
And there are skills to be learnt in there that are valuable.
It is invaluable for school and for the workplace and for discipline and control. But give your child a separate opportunity for free art, creative art, like you've been doing with the babies downstairs. They're touching and playing and working in the sterile mud with the rice. And give them that and help them to accept that in an academic environment, there are conformities which are real and necessary. But try and give them the balance of expression.
That's amazing. I think that's very sound, wise advice for parents to hold on to. Gabs, you spoke earlier about neural pathways, and we know that we can develop healthy ones, we can develop toxic ones. But what happens in our brains when we engage in art or creative processes?
Do you know, Pips, it's been actually recorded through PET scans, etc., that when you engage in the creative process, so much energy and electricity goes towards your pleasure area in your brain. Even more, it lights up more than it would interacting with family members that you love. Okay.
Wow.
Good family members. And what's happening is you increasing your serotonin levels. Now, serotonin is there to help you deal with emotions and make even-keeled decisions. Yeah. And our children are very often missing a lot of the serotonin production because of the high stress levels they start off with in life.
Yeah.
So with creativity, you actually now are making more serotonin in the body. That's not technically true making serotonin, but basically you're using more serotonin, you're creating a calmness, and those neural pathways are being lined with really good dopamine. So that reinforcing that relaxation that go to do art as opposed to throwing my toys out the cot becomes a natural thing. And you want that.
Yeah. And you know, when I had a conversation with an art teacher a few weeks ago, actually on our first conversation, she was talking about building reservoirs of joy. And that has just stuck with me. And I think I've said it over and over again. But that is exactly what you're saying. You're bringing in the brain science here as to how reservoirs of joy are actually built.
Yes, exactly.
I just think that is so inspiring and so good for parents to know that art is a really viable, important way if your child is needing therapy, is needing intervention in some area, that art is an incredible way to do it.
Much so. And even if even if you just want to help your child by just giving them some creative materials, that in itself is already starting the therapeutic process.
Amazing. Wow, Gabs, thank you so much for just these nuggets of wisdom that you've left with us today. I'm a young mom, so I've got lots to learn on this journey, and it's an exciting one to be on. So I hold on to all these words from wise moms and grandmothers around me. Thank you for joining us.
It's a pleasure. And if I could just add one more thing.
Yes.
Keep Vanish on hand for the clothing. Keep Domestos on hand for the cleanup, and you'll be fine.
Thank you. I will do.